$350,000. Gone. Not gambled away, not lost in a bad investment, not swallowed by a medical emergency. Handed over, piece by careful piece, to a 26-year-old Filipina woman who told me she had never been with a man. I'm 62 years old. I'm sitting in a $10 room in Malate, Manila, with a ceiling fan and a view of a concrete wall, and I want to talk to you right now about the word virgin. Not in a crude way, in a serious, expensive, dangerous way. I want to talk about what that single word does to a man in his 60s who grew up believing it meant something irreplaceable. What it does to a man who hasn't felt genuinely chosen in longer than he can clearly remember. Because that word, that one piece of manufactured personal identity, was the hinge the entire operation swung on. The story Joy told me about herself unlocked something in me that cost $350,000 to close again. If you are watching this with a vision of a young, traditional, pure Filipina woman waiting for you in the provinces somewhere, I am not here to destroy that vision. I am here to show you exactly what it costs when you pursue it without understanding how the game is played. Subscribe to this channel. Stay with me on this, because the education I'm about to give you cost me everything I spent 35 years building. I worked 32 years as a logistics supervisor in Columbus, Ohio. Regional distribution company, middle management, the kind of career that runs on consistency and competence and gets very little applause for either. I was the man who kept things running while other people got promoted over him. I showed up. I delivered. I managed teams and contracts and complex supply chains without drama or complaint. And by the time I cashed out my retirement at 62, I had $350,000 set aside, plus a monthly pension, plus the very clear understanding that I had spent my entire adult life being functional and reliable and almost entirely invisible. My apartment in Columbus had the particular silence of a space that has only ever housed one person for too long. I ate dinner alone most nights. I watched television without caring much what was on. When I started researching the Philippines as a place to retire, it was the descriptions of the women that pulled at something I hadn't examined honestly in years. Men on expat forums writing about feeling respected for the first time in decades, about women who cooked without being asked and showed physical affection without it being a negotiation, about a culture where the man of the household was honored rather than merely tolerated. And then the detail that appeared again and again, always delivered with a certain quiet reverence. She had never been with anyone before. Provincial woman, traditional values, untouched by the chaos of modern dating culture. That phrase showed up in enough places that it stopped feeling like a detail and started feeling like a category. Like something real and rare that you could still find if you went to the right place and were the right kind of man. I did not fly to the Philippines specifically looking for a virgin, but when Joy appeared and the story was offered to me in exactly the right way, I did not question it for a single moment. I was primed. The story landed in an empty space that had been waiting for it. Joy was introduced to me through a contact at the hotel where I stayed during my first scouting trip. A Filipino man who said his cousin was a good woman, raised with traditional values, focused on family, had never been in a serious relationship because she'd been occupied with helping her mother look after the younger siblings. When I met Joy for the first time, she was wearing a light blue blouse, hair pulled back simply, no heavy makeup, no jewelry designed to draw attention. She looked exactly like the picture those forum posts had painted. Soft voice, modest manner, laugh that she covered with her hand. On our third meeting, the subject of her personal history came up in what felt like an organic moment. She was asking me about my past, my marriage, my life, and I asked about hers. She looked slightly away from me before answering, like someone gathering the courage to share something vulnerable. She had never been in a relationship, she said, never found anyone who felt serious or safe. She had been focused on her family. She hoped someday to find a man who was stable and kind and who meant the things he said. She said it simply, factually, without any theatrical emphasis, and I accepted it instantly. Not because I was incapable of skepticism, because I wanted it to be true with a force that made skepticism feel like a betrayal of something I hadn't finished wanting yet. I flew home, put my remaining affairs in order, and went back to start my actual life. I want to slow down here because the speed at which this decision happened matters. Between meeting Joy and committing my entire retirement to a life built around her, less than 4 months passed. 4 months of online conversations, 1 in-person scouting trip, a few weeks of face-to-face time in the Philippines, and I was done deliberating. Every practical objection I might have raised to myself was answered by the emotional certainty that this was real. She seemed real. The connection seemed real. The feeling of being chosen seemed more real than anything I had felt in 15 years. That feeling is a weapon when it is manufactured by someone who knows exactly how to manufacture it. The virgin story was the specific ammunition, because it did not just make me feel chosen, it made me feel responsible for what she had chosen to share with me. That decision cost me everything I had. But the mechanism that made it cost everything wasn't the money. It was the purity story. Because purity, once accepted, creates obligation. And obligation is far more powerful than attraction when it comes to separating a man from his resources. Here is the thing I want you to understand about the virgin narrative that took me far too long to see clearly. It does not simply make you feel wanted. It makes you feel responsible. When a woman presents herself as someone who has trusted you with something irreplaceable, something she has never given to anyone else, something she risked her dignity and reputation to share with you specifically, you become the protector of that trust. Not because anyone forced you into that role, because you accepted it. Because men raised with certain values about honor and commitment feel that role as a genuine moral weight. Joy never had to apply direct financial pressure most of the time. She would simply look worried or quiet or tired, and I would ask what was wrong, and there was always something. Her mother's health, the roof, a sick animal their family depended on, tuition fees for siblings who later turned out to be her children, medical costs for relatives I never verified. And each time, the ask would be framed the same way. I'm so ashamed to bring this to you. I don't want to be a burden. I'll figure something out. But I was the man who had been trusted with her most sacred offering. I was not going to let her carry these burdens alone. That would have made me unworthy of the trust she had placed in me. So I paid. Over 9 months, I sent approximately $49,000 in what I called family emergencies. I also put $60,000 into a concrete house in her province, a home built on land that, because Philippine law prohibits foreign ownership, was titled in Joy's name. Her lawyer drew up a document called a usufruct agreement, written in clean English, that supposedly gave me the right to live on the property indefinitely. I signed it without having it reviewed by any attorney I had chosen myself. I was the man she had chosen. Of course I signed. Meanwhile, the boy she had never mentioned, a 3-year-old living with her mother in the province, was being raised partly on the money I was wiring through the orange and green Palawan Express counter near our apartment. And the man who fathered that child, Rodel, 29 years old, who I would not learn the name of until much later, was almost certainly receiving updates on the progress of the operation with the American. The discovery came in stages, and each one stripped away a different layer of the story I had been living inside. First, the phone. I found it while looking for a charging cable in the storage room of the house I had built, a cheap Android device tucked inside a bag inside another bag on the bottom shelf. I opened it without any particular plan and immediately saw a photo album. Joy and a young Filipino man at a beach. Joy holding a small child at what looked like a birthday party. The child had her eyes. The photos had timestamps. The most recent ones were from a month I remembered clearly because Joy and I had spent that particular weekend cooking together and watching rain come in from the rice fields, and she had told me she had never felt this safe with anyone in her life. I sat on the floor of that storage room with the phone in my hands for a long time without moving. Then I put it back exactly where I found it and spent the next week being very quiet and very careful. I made contact with a retired American teacher who had been living in the area for years and who helped me verify things through people he trusted in the local community. What he helped me confirm over the following days: Joy had a child she had never disclosed. Joy had a long-term Filipino partner who was the father of that child. The hotel contact who had introduced us to each other was her cousin, not a neutral acquaintance. The lawyer who prepared my usufruct agreement was personally connected to her family. The emergencies across 9 months had been coordinated, timed, and sized to stay just below the threshold that might prompt hard questions. There had been another foreign man before me, a German national, 2 years earlier, who had financed an earlier version of the same operation and left without ever fully understanding what had been done to him. I was the upgraded investment. I want to be specific about what it felt like to look at those photographs. Not the emotional content. I'll leave that out because it isn't useful to you. What I want you to understand is the structural moment. I had spent 9 months inside a story in which I was the chosen one, the stable man she had been waiting for, the protector of something sacred and irreplaceable. The photographs on that phone did not just tell me Joy had lied. They told me the story had never existed. Every moment I had inhabited as real, every dinner she cooked, every evening on the porch, every forever in the dark, had been constructed set dressing. The actual story, Joy's actual life, was in those photographs. The child, the man, the beach, the birthday party. All of it happening in parallel, just outside the frame of the story she had built for me. I have no word for what that realization feels like in the body. I sat on the floor of that storage room for what might have been 30 minutes, and I tried to locate one thing I remembered from 9 months that I was certain was real, and I could not find it. When I confronted Joy with what I had found, her response was almost completely flat. She said I had misunderstood things. She said Rodell was complicated to explain. She said the child was something she had been afraid to bring up. She said she loved me, in a voice with no warmth attached to the words at all. She had anticipated this conversation and prepared for it. The flatness confirmed everything the phone had already told me. I walked out of that house with a single backpack, and she let me leave without a word. She did not need to stop me. She had the house, the land, the deed, the $49,000 in transfers, and the complete financial outcome she had been constructing from the beginning. I went back to Manila and found the room I am sitting in now. $10 a night, concrete view, ceiling fan that moves the heat without removing it. I want to be honest with you in the most direct way I know how, because I think you deserve that far more than you deserve a story that ends with a lesson that sounds manageable. I am not a foolish man. I spent 32 years managing complex operations, reading people, spotting inconsistencies in plans and systems. And I was dismantled by a 26-year-old woman with a practiced smile and one sentence about her personal history. The reason it worked is not that I was stupid. The reason it worked is that the virgin narrative hit me exactly where I was most hollow. It told me I was the man worth waiting for. It told me I was different from all the men who hadn't been chosen. It told me I owed her the protection and stability she had trusted me to provide. And I paid $350,000 to keep believing that story about myself. The specific cruelty of it is that the story was never about joy at all. It was always about me, my loneliness, my need, my hunger to finally be the chosen one. If you are out there right now with your savings intact and a dream about a traditional Filipina woman in the provinces, hear me clearly. The dream is not automatically a lie, but the first version of it that gets handed to you, perfectly packaged and calibrated to your exact emotional profile, probably is. Ask questions you actually want the answers to. Verify independently. Protect your finances the way you would protect any other contract. And subscribe to this channel, not as a favor to me, but as a commitment to yourself to stay informed and stay protected. I handed over my entire retirement for a story about purity that never existed. Don't let the next man she tells that story to be you. And understand this clearly, the virgin story is not unique to joy. It is a known and specifically effective technique because it has a known and specifically effective target. Men of a certain generation, raised with certain values, who equate purity with sincerity and sincerity with trustworthiness. If you hear that story in the early stages of a relationship with a woman significantly younger than you in the Philippines, treat it as a signal to increase scrutiny, not decrease it. Not because every woman who says it is lying, but because it is a well-documented technique used in well-documented operations, and the cost of assuming it is true without verifying is, in my case, $350,000 and a decade of remaining retirement I am now spending in a $10 room in Malate. I am here. I am recording these videos. I am not going anywhere. Subscribe and stay informed because staying informed is the only thing between you and becoming exactly what I became.